All right, let's take a little walk down memory lane. You're 4 years old again. You're in preschool. You're learning your ABCs and your one, two, threes, and you're learning that the cow says moo and the chicken says cluck. You're learning about all the different jobs of the world, and people are constantly asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have all kinds of answers. Your answers are, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a singer. I want to be an actress. I want to be a veterinarian. And everyone's all excited because you are excited. And that's what we want to see in a young child. We want to see curiosity and we want to see people excited to learn new things. So then you go into elementary school. And all of a sudden, you're taking math tests and you're learning history facts. And it's still fun, it's still good. And then you go into middle school and high school, and then you find that all of your days are now filled up with studying for tests where you are answering questions you're not actually even curious about. These are someone else's questions, but you have to memorize the facts to get the questions right so that you get a good grade, so that you can get into the best college, and then you can get the best job, which means you're now making enough money to buy a nice house and drive a nice car and put your kids through school. And then there you have it. You're successful. But somewhere along the way, we went from what do you want to be when you grow up and what are you most excited about learning to, well, I checked all the boxes and here I am. Now I'm sitting in meetings about meetings, listening to people talk about their meetings and future meetings. And my life is now just a series of meetings. And after work, I'll go to the grocery store and I'll feed my kids dinner. And then I'll go to bed and think, I don't even remember what my answer was to that question when I was 4 of who I want to be when I grow up. Or maybe you do remember, and it's just like such a distant memory that, oh, well, maybe that was unrealistic and this is what life is really about. Because this is what everyone's doing, right? We're all doing our best to follow the formula for success. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel like that's working out really well for a lot of us. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, hello, and welcome to Powered by Purpose. I'm Melody Lacey, and if you couldn't tell, that story was about me, both as a child and now as a parent who wants the best for my kids. Although, fun fact, I don't actually go to the grocery store. It's my husband's territory. And I didn't actually want to be any of those things. But I also never wanted to spend my life sitting in lots of meetings. And so I spent years relentlessly pursuing something better than what I was experiencing. And along the way, I found some pretty amazing tools. So now my career looks totally different, and I help people clear the perceptions that keep you from being able to see and treat ourselves and others the way God asks us to. Because at the end of the day, wherever we go, whatever it is we're doing, everything revolves around our relationship with ourselves and with others and with God. And so our perception around those relationships matters more than most of us realize. So today we're going to take a God and others focused approach to self-discovery and personal growth. And we'll do that by examining how our beliefs shape our perception of reality, which, as you'll see, is pretty key to learning what's really driving our behavior. And that's really the first step in renewing our thinking with God's truth so that we can start seeing things more clearly. And thankfully, He's given us a template and tools to live out His calling for us. So we're going to unpack the real reason success doesn't feel successful. Certainly not the success of childhood dreams. And it's probably not because you're ungrateful. It's way more likely that, like I was, you're stuck measuring your life by a definition of success that was never designed for you in the first place. And so you've probably caught yourself thinking, I should feel more fulfilled than I do. And maybe you can't shake the feeling that something doesn't fit. Meanwhile, you know other people who would love to be where you are. So you feel guilty admitting that you're unfulfilled. And you try to be positive. But now that positivity is becoming toxic and you're white knuckling it through those meetings and forcing gratitude. But let me just say, you're not alone. You probably already know that. There's no shortage of this topic being talked about all the time. But forced gratitude isn't what God asks us for. And you're probably not struggling for the reason you think you are. You see, most advice in this arena revolves around tapping into motivation tactics of how to get the most out of your day, how to be more disciplined, how to target your ambition and focus on your work ethics, maybe developing new skills, and really working on that gratitude, how to really feel it instead of forcing it. But what if none of those things are actually the problem? I mean, I thought they were. So for years, that's what I tried to fix. I thought I simply needed to find a better job or upskill and maybe have a different role or become a better leader. So developing those skills. And while all of those things have a place in personal growth, what I realized was I wasn't actually burnt out because I couldn't handle the work. I was burned out because I was working against the way God had actually designed me. And that's equal parts exciting and terrifying because once you've invested years into something, I mean, that whole path, right? From elementary school until your career, where you're reevaluating all of your life choices, it becomes terrifying to admit that maybe you're not where you're supposed to be because now the stakes are high. Maybe you have a mortgage and a car payment and you're taking care of your family. So the stakes feel really high and it might feel like it's too late to reevaluate, but it's not. I promise you. God has you here for a reason, and there's time to turn things around if you're living through survival mode. And there's another way that you might not be familiar with to examine your situation. You see, our understanding of ourselves develops over time, and it's shaped by two primary factors: the standards we use to evaluate ourselves, which is what drives our perception and our expectations, and our actual priorities, our true internal priorities that are driving our decisions and behavior. And these often conflict with the standards we're evaluating ourselves by. So let's start with the standards, because that's what we've already touched on. And that's the crux of what keeps us in careers that suck the life out of us and keep us in survival mode. Every single one of us inherits standards. It's what I just talked about. It's the standards we learn in school. We inherit them from our family and our upbringing and our culture, sometimes our religious beliefs. And then there's the highlight reels on social media. And all of these things contribute to what success looks like. And so the hard part is we almost never see our standards and expectations as personal interpretations. We see them as reality. And we assume everyone else should see these situations the same way we do because the standard feels so obvious. But obvious isn't objective, it's simply familiar. And here's where it gets tricky. Most people have never been shown how to consciously examine where their standards come from. We simply absorb them. That was the story earlier, right? We grow up in a society and a school system and with our parents, and we learn what success looks like. And then we spend our entire lives measuring ourselves against those standards. So if you've been brought up believing that storyline of success, but you're not exactly loving your life, then it's very likely that you're spending your days in constant conflict with the second factor, which is your core priorities. And so most people spend their lives trying to force themselves into environments that reward someone else's priorities. But every single one of us has a set of our own unique priorities. And they are what determine what energizes us, what drains us, what feels meaningful versus what feels forced. No two people on the planet prioritize the exact same things in the exact same order to the exact same degree of magnitude. Everyone is driven by different priorities. And those priorities are the real indicator of what we truly value as individuals. So if your job requires you to spend your time on tasks you don't value, then it's going to absolutely drive you nuts. So for example, personal freedom ranks super high on my priority list. So it's a real wonder why having to work on other people's schedules all the time didn't work out well for me. I also despise wasting time, and I'm super driven by making progress. I need to see progress. And you don't feel like you've made a ton of progress if all you've done is write a bunch of emails all day long. And so that was a real trigger for me. Those endless meetings about meetings, just to schedule more meetings, drove me absolutely crazy. And then there's my need for total honesty and transparency. And I'm a direct communicator, and I really value authentic relationships. So, the political side of corporate America didn't exactly cater to that. Or maybe you're someone who's super creative, but you keep finding yourselves in production related or administrative roles. Well, that's an example where you might feel a disconnect that you can't really put your finger on. Maybe you don't even know that you're creative. Maybe all that got lost in the course of your life since you were 4 years old. And now you're wondering why you don't like the roles you're in, even though they pay well. So that's where digging deeper into your intrinsic priorities will help you identify the disconnect. Or maybe you're someone who loves research. You just love digging into things. You find yourself doing that in other areas of your life all the time. But at work, you're simply executing tasks someone else defined for you, and your input isn't even taken into account. Well, that's a clue that you're not in a role designed for you and who you are and how you naturally work. And so all of these examples are where friction can fester in our lives. Because if you continue to grade yourself against all those inherited standards and they don't align with how God actually wired you, then you're going to keep feeling like you're not measuring up. When the real issue is simply a misinterpretation of yourself. Because you're measuring yourself against someone else's criteria, and you have been for years, so at this point it feels natural. But that's precisely why you're stuck in a never-ending cycle of self-judgment. And it's just not necessary. And what's awesome is that when you start seeing all of this, you stop trying to explain why every environment isn't working or focusing on how other people need to change. The more important question is, why isn't your situation working for you? Those are very different conversations. If I had understood my priorities years ago, leaving that job that was just tearing me apart would have felt a lot less like failure and more like stewardship. I would have been able to analyze the situation with what inside me is being activated right now. And I would have been able to gather clues about the disconnects driving my discontentment. And to be clear, I tried to do this. I just didn't have the tools I have now. But I will say, one thing that I learned spiritually, which deserves its own episode, is that I no longer torture myself with believing that God has one perfect job for each of us. I really obsessed over that. I thought my calling meant something very specific, and sometimes it does. But what I've learned is that it's more about stewardship. But at the same time, God didn't ask us to imitate someone else's calling either. He's entrusted each of us with different unique gifts, different responsibilities, and different opportunities. So real stewardship begins by honestly understanding what God has entrusted you with. And so you can start asking yourself, what part of your work consistently energizes you? What part consistently drains you? Where are you naturally organized? And where do you feel the need for constant external motivation? What is your definition of success? And who taught you that definition? Where did it come from? Is it yours? Or did you just get on board for it because it seems like it's what works? So when you're ready to stop the cycle of striving to reach someone else's definition of success, a great next step is to identify your priorities. And that's how you pull back the curtain on what's already shaping your perception of yourself and the world around you. And until you understand where your tension is really coming from, you'll continue reacting to the symptoms like I was all those years. And this is exactly why I created the Core Priorities Snapshot, which you can find at everythingonpurpose.com/snapshot. And it's a totally free interactive tool. It's not just another one-size-fits-all guide that you'll never get to, because come on, none of us have time for that. And also, no one else can tell you who you are and how you're uniquely designed and wired and exactly what you need. No one can do that. Not me, not another personalities or skills assessment that just labels you, and not another guru who doesn't even know you personally. Only God and your willingness to honestly examine the evidence he's already revealing through your life. That's how this is different. This is an experience that gives you real-time personalized feedback to start peeling back those layers our schooling never taught us to examine. And once you gain this level of insight, you can begin improving on how you experience your life and everyone in it. Plus, the coolest thing about the Core Priorities Snapshot is that it's literally the starting point for everything I offer. So if in the future working together one-on-one becomes the right next step for you, the snapshot is exactly where we will begin. Because every insight becomes part of the foundation you'll continue to build on. And skipping steps is a total waste of time. So head over to everythingonpurpose.com/snapshot. And yes, I said everything on purpose, because here's the thing. Once you're powered by purpose, you begin living more intentionally. And before long, everything you do will be on purpose in the best way. So that's my company's name. And soon it'll be your new mantra and mode of operation. So if you're ready to take back control of the only thing you can control anyway, which is, of course, yourself, then seriously, stop the cycle and go check it out at everythingonpurpose.com/snapshot. And by the way, if you're a current Substack subscriber, you already have access. So just use the link that's in the emails you get from me and log in to get started. And if you aren't a subscriber, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on so that you can continue to learn how to see yourself, others, and God the way He asks us to. And so now you're armed with a super cool, free, interactive tool to start your journey at everythingonpurpose.com/snapshot. The link is in the show notes too. But if you're driving or out for a walk, then just remember everythingonpurpose.com/snapshot. And also remember that meaningful work isn't discovered by becoming someone else or working endlessly to meet someone else's priorities. It's built by faithfully stewarding the person God already designed you to be. And that's where real fulfillment begins. And it's available for everyone, including